Hello and welcome to Channel -5 News. I'm your host, Blayden Huber, and this is my co-host, Czahor.
Today we're going to be discussing news about the Cold War. To begin, we're going to send you to Ewen for information about the United Nations.
In today's recent news, there has been a new organization called the United Nations, aka the UN. The United Nations is to make a world a better place and to prevent a repeat of the recent World War. Every member of the United Nations is going to have one vote on what to do. The 5 permanent members of the United Nations are Britain, France, China, the United States, and the Soviet Union. These 5 members will have veto powers over the other countries depending on the situation. The next piece of news today is on the topic of the Soviet-occupied parts of Europe. After the war, the Soviet Union is currently in charge of the eastern part of Europe, but the Soviets are more or less occupying their parts of Europe. These countries being controlled had to follow strict communist rules, and no one is allowed to cross over to the eastern part or vice versa to the western part. Winston Churchill has recently said, an iron curtain has fallen upon Europe. Alright, back to you, Blayden.
Thanks, Ewan. Now for our next story, I'm going to send you to Dakota Kaeb for a story on Potsdam and Yalta.
Thank you, Blayden. We have news that Roosevelt has met with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin in Yalta, a Soviet resort off the Black Sea, to discuss life after the war. The biggest problem they have discussed is Poland. Stalin has sent troops into Poland to liberate the country from Germany and allow Poland to choose their own government. Soon after, they have realized the invaders of Germany had to come west through Poland, making them a threat. Roosevelt and Churchill agreed to recognize Poland as a Soviet government, but include pre-war politicians to include some independents. Our next story is on Potsdam, a small town near Berlin where President Truman met Stalin to work out a deal on Germany. Soviet soldiers have started to strip their zones in Germany of all machinery for use back home. Truman insisted that Germany should have time for their industry to recover. Allies have allowed industry to revive in other zones. However, Stalin has opposed to this idea since Soviet zones are mostly agricultural. It could not provide all the reparations the Soviets wanted. While at Potsdam, Truman has learned about a successful U.S. atomic bomb and tries to hint at Stalin that we have a new and very powerful weapon. Back to you, Connor.
Thanks, Dakota. Now for our next story about Billy Ray.
United States troops are using Korea to try and disarm the Japanese, but the Soviet Union has the same idea. The Soviets have control over the North while we back the South. Border clashes are coming to be very common, where the North and the South fight over the border. The North quickly put together an army, leaving the South almost defenseless. Truman saw the communist invasion of South Korea as a test of the containment policy and ordered American naval and air power into action. He then called on the United Nations to act. The war is finally starting to turn around, and the U.S. has finally been able to contain communism. After World War II, Western Europe faced lots of problems. Economies are ruined, people are starving, and political chaos is in hand. The Marshall Plan is kind of like a relief plan to help let people get back on their feet and help the country get going again.
Before we get on with the next part, a quick commercial break. Does your drink taste awful? Do you want something refreshing? Are you feeling like a commie? Well, boy, do I have the thing for you. Lemonade! With one drink, you'll feel more like Lenin than Lenin ever did. Made with secret ingredients, communism, and love. This red bottle of go-go juice will make you feel like the 1917 revolution in one kick of a drink. So crack open the cold one with the comrades and get a bottle of Lemonade. Disclaimer, Lemonade may cause severe diarrhea and heartburn over the age of 65 or if you are a capitalist. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Billy Ray, for that interesting story. Now for our next story, I'm going to send you to Jeffrey for stories on the Berlin airlift and the NATO and Warsaw Pact.
After World War II, American President Truman believed that the recovery of Europe depended on the prosperity of Germany, but the Soviet Union believed that Germany still had to pay reparations for all the damage they caused during World War II. America allowed Germany to have their own government, which angered the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union then blockaded West Berlin. Now America is beginning the Berlin airlift. They're sending bombers capable of carrying atomic bombs to Britain and 2 million tons of supplies to Berlin in hopes to stop the blockade of West Berlin from the Soviet Union.
The
Cold War has spread past Europe and into Asia, China, and Korea. America now has to send troops back to Asia just 5 years after World War II. Since the blockade on West Berlin, the public has been supporting an alliance between us and Western Europe. A new alliance was created called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This treaty involves 12 countries: the US, Canada, Britain, France, Italy, Belgium, Denmark, Portugal, the Netherlands, Norway, Luxembourg, and Iceland. All these countries have agreed to come to aid to any country that is attacked during the war. Because this alliance was created, the Soviet Union also created their own alliance with Eastern Europe called the Warsaw Pact. Alright, thanks guys. Now back to you, Blayden and Connor.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Now to Rusty for news about the Truman Doctrine and the containment.
The long telegram is circulating widely in Truman's administration and becoming the basis of the administration policy of containment since the end of World War. Most American officials agreed the best defense against the Soviet threat was a strategy called containment. The Soviet Union wrote a political force committed financially the belief that the U.S. there can be no permanent modus vivendi. Also, today, the President ordered the Franklin D. Roosevelt aircraft carrier to join the Missouri in protecting Turkey and Eastern Mediterranean. Shortly after, Truman went before Congress to ask for $400 million to fight communist aggression in Greece and Turkey.
Thanks, Rusty. Now for our last story, we're going to send you to Robert for stories on the USSR and U.S. concerns and the Chinese Revolution.
Currently, the USSR is becoming more and more concerned with their own personal safety. Their objective is to keep the Germans weak and to keep all countries between them and Germany under their control. Soviets say that communism is a superior economical system and that all other nations should switch. But even with their efforts to try to turn everybody into that, they suspect that they're trying to plan on destroying communism. So they have been keeping their eye on those countries. Interesting news in China. Forces that are being led by none other than Mao Zedong are struggling with the nationalist government led by Kai-shek. Even with that, they have decided to put a pause on their war efforts to focus on a common enemy, the Japanese occupations. Even with that set aside, they still somehow have a civil war breakout between the two sides. They have been trying to compromise for a little while now, but no compromises have been yet confirmed. Also, news coming in from our U.S. representatives. The U.S. has declared that they will be stopping the funding of $2 billion to the Chinese nationalists. This has made the remaining Chinese nationalists go into hiding into islands of the Formosa area.
Alright, thank you guys for tuning in to Channel Negative 5 News. This concludes our newscast about the Cold War. Hope you enjoyed and see you next time.
Thanks, Jeffy.
Thank you guys for tuning in to Channel Negative 5 News. This concludes our...
Hello there, this is Rusty Hoover from Texas. The current... Interesting news in China. Forces that are being led of none but